feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Monday afternoon. It's January 27th after the Wolves, their last game was Saturday afternoon, a 29-point win over the Denver Nuggets. One of their most dominant performances of the season. It's Monday, so that means I have Wolves beat writer Jace Frederick from the St. Paul Pioneer Press here with me. And Jace, I just want to start by asking you, like, how you are framing that win. Is it, I mean, they haven't had a lot of great wins this season. They've beaten some good teams that were hurt. They've largely been healthy, so they couldn't have one of those, like, oh, we were shorthanded and came back and beat so-and-so team. Like, where do you rank this amongst the wins that the Wolves have had this season? Is this number one?
Yeah, I think it's got to be number one. Like, you, ahead of the show, you sent me some of the other better ones, and then you're like, I didn't go all the way back, and I went all the way back, and there's nothing back there. It's nothing worth looking back 2 months for. I think it was easily, in terms of just like the general opponent, healthy. Like, I think Denver's a good matchup for them, but like that I think equated to like a 3-point win earlier in the year against Denver. This was like dominant basketball and fully like committing to and exploiting like your matchup advantages and like sticking to something and finding the ways in which the opponent was weak and taking advantage of the different looks they were throwing at you. Like, complete beginning to end, pretty much domination. And they haven't done that against a good, healthy team all year. And the other ones you sent was like, okay, they beat that, they won that hurt.
Yeah, what was even your second
against that hurt
one?
team by a little bit? I don't know. I mean, like some of the Clippers ones, it's like Norman Powell only played in one of those Clippers games, and the Wolves won it by 2. And it was like, yeah, that was a good win. Yeah. But beating a Clippers team that you should be on par with at home by 2 points is like, it's a good win. This was like, I don't know. There aren't many great wins on the thing. Like, you sent that Houston game, and I agree that was a great win. It's great to win in Houston, but like thoroughly outplayed for a lot of that game, and it was a miracle. I mean, like, it was a miracle. So like this,
and
was
they were
so much
shorthanded too,
right? Yeah. Houston was also on the second half of back-to-back down a couple guys, and this was like pretty level playing field and just dominated a good opponent. They have not done that really any other time this year.
But I was just like going through them, and I'm like, what? Okay, I think this, for the record, I think this was their best win, and we're gonna not always like the topics we go into are exactly related to the game, but what we're gonna talk about today is like Rudy's big game, particularly like in the middle of the floor. That's like a key factor against Denver. Ant's playmaking, and then Jaden's like quick decision making. Like, those 3 things were all really good in that game, and they like kind of built off of each other. And I think like the best games of this season, like I said, we're going to talk about Ant, are the ones where like the playmaking is maybe not on point all the time, because that's a ridiculous standard, but smart playmaking opportunities. And so I thought of that Kings game, which was ironically kind of like similar coverage, right? Like, the Nuggets bring Jokic up, and the Kings bring Sabonis up. And I know you're looking at me, that Jokic was up in the first half.
No, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he wasn't. Yeah.
And so what Ant has to do then in those situations is put 2 on him and play make and be a passer. And then you remember the end of that Kings game, it was like they put 2 on him, threw it to Mike, ran right back to Mike, grabbed the ball, got to the basket, got the game-winning free throws. So I think, to me, not putting that much thought into it, I think the Kings one was probably number 2. The Knicks one people would reference from recently, but obviously you're playing against a Knicks team without Cat a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I found that makes it sound like we're being like, oh, the Wolves suck. This was actually a really impressive, really good win, and it was a healthy Nuggets team. Maybe if you're a Nuggets fan right now and you're listening to this, you're like, okay, well, they weren't very locked in, and
yeah, sure,
it wasn't a great effort game, I felt like, by the Nuggets, but that to me is very different than being like Team X was shorthanded. I thought this was the best Gobert game, or the best game, because Gobert was involved in it, specifically in the Ant playmaking element of it.
Right.
And I mean, I've been really frustrated with the Gobert offensive stuff. Like, at least for the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about it on pretty much every episode. And I just feel like if Gobert is ignored in the offense and not passed to, it's 5-on-4, and it just it's so problematic for this season, in that it's hard to win that game, and then it's like problematic existentially, as you go into the future years with him on this team. I thought Rudy was, legitimately awesome in that role by his standards, but just kind of overall, like really, really impactful in the middle of the floor. What stood out to you?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, that's exactly like it doesn't, like you said, it's by his standards, and that's fine. Like the Timberwolves don't need like this really like wow playmaking center operating out of the middle of the floor. They need like they need to an option to utilize. You know, it's not you have to lean heavily on it. It's like if a team is going to give him a wide open 5 feet in the middle of the court, well, then it's going to be hard for anything else to function if you're not going to utilize that option. And for Rudy, it can be just slowing down and getting the ball and then being like, okay, nobody's committing here. I can like take my time and get in here and like get to like a decent finishing position, take that push shot you like or whatever. Or if naturally like people do suck in and now it's like take time, make the obvious pass, and then that's either going to spark a shot over there or more ball movement as the defense recovers. Like it's an easy, like at the point that he is wide open in the middle of the floor, you have broken the defense down unless you don't go to that option. And then you just play right into the defense's hands. So like there has to be a comfort or a willingness to do that. And like people are like, well, he'll drop it this many times. I'm like, that doesn't matter. Like the process has to stand because if you do the right thing again and again and again, and it doesn't work, then guess what? Then if I'm like a front office, I'm going, well, we're doing the right thing and it's not paying off. So now we need to change something. But if you're not even doing the right thing, I go, I don't know. Do we even get somebody else in there or whatever? Do we change personnel? We're not doing the right play anyway. Does it matter who's out there? So yeah, I just think like, and Rudy obviously paid it off because I think the more often that the right play is made, and when you can anticipate the right play being made, you're not surprised by a pass. You know when it's coming. You're more ready for it, and you're probably like just more in the rhythm of the game of like, okay, now here's what I will do when I get it. When you're not like, oh my god, they just passed it to me.
Right. Well, and that's the difference between. It seems like with Rudy specifically, the difference between him catching the ball at a high rate or not catching the ball at a high rate or executing it is like consistently going to it and building his confidence in the process of that, and his teammates building their confidence in the process of feeding Rudy. So the defense has to adjust, as we'll get into, as the Denver defense did. It's like you probably don't have to hit Rudy in the pocket like 40 times over the course of the game, because if you do and it's effective, because it is literally 4-on-3 on the backside there, if you can make that completion, like it's going to be points. They're gonna make an adjustment out of it, and I thought that's what was like interesting about Rudy's answer after the game when I asked him about it, and he's just like it's about them being confident in him too. Here's Rudy. Is that for you and for this team when you're like
super important? I work on that shot a lot, but I don't. Today I got to realize how important it is for my teammates' confidence. What the comments that they made. I realized that when I'm decisive and confident, they have more confidence in finding me in the situation. So yeah, just for me, just about being decisive, being aggressive. These shots came naturally because I work on it.
Sorry, it was very loud. Timberwolves locker room Saturday afternoon after that game. Anthony Edwards didn't talk to the media, but he talked to the background, the entire the entirety of all the other interviews that we did. But I wanted to get that in there because that's it, right, Jace? It is like those things playing on top of each other of like get Rudy confidence, stay confident in him. The game opens up, and I think like that. I like what you said about the 3-point game versus a 30-point game. That's what opening stuff up is it's like you're opening up new problems for Denver to need to account for on the defensive side of the floor that maybe transcends to the offensive side of the floor. Like it's so clear to me that Rudy in the middle of the floor being able to catch it as a passer found right away. It was right away at the beginning of the game, right? He found like Jaden for a dive, dunk. He had one of those where it's a deep seal and it was on Jamal Murray. And we're like, okay, that one gets the thumbs up. This 6'2" guy or whatever,
right?
Catch, turn, dunk. Like we're fine with those. If that's Aaron Gordon, no,
right.
Like we don't seal there. And then also laugh about the push shot, but they kind of adjusted to drop in the second half. And now Rudy's there and Jokic is at the rim. It's like a little 6 foot, like extend your 7'9" wingspan, take a short floater there. Those are the 3 boxes for Rudy in the middle of the floor. Well, 4 if we say catch is 1, which is big. 2, be a passer, be aware where the low man's coming from, make a pass. He did that. Score and deep seals. And then occasionally, if you do get a catch at like 6 feet and it's open, he's got to be able to take that floater there if the opponent is in drop. I don't know. Like, no notes. Really good by Rudy in that one, and good by his teammates continually finding him.
I mean, it's just like, remember in the past and like the playoffs and everything, it was like when Rudy was on the court, we would watch Tony pick and rolls. We'd be like, Denver's not even pretending like Ant's going to pass to Rudy.
The whole playoffs.
Yeah, they were just entirely, their whole game plans like, we don't have the personnel to guard Ant, but maybe we do if we pretend like one guy on the court doesn't exist. And it almost worked for him. It almost worked for him. like in a matchup that is not good for them, they almost pulled it out because of that. So like if Minnesota, and this matchup I think is the most obvious of like, they don't even pretend like he's there, but that's a good time to work on it, you know, like, and maybe build confidence and now be like, okay, now it might not be there every time, but there will be times throughout the game where on this, you will see a similar look where Gobert is just not really addressed and give it to him, you know, like, and that's a big step for Minnesota. Like, I think a big key for them always is like, okay, you found something that works. Like, can you build upon it? And sometimes I often don't feel like they actually build upon things, especially offensively. But if this can be a game where they do that, then it might be one where you go, okay, that was a big step forward for them in figuring out how can we actually be a top 10 offensive team, or at least play like one on the majority of nights versus one that is just a total eyesore.
Well, that's what Mike said after the game. Number one, he said, quote, number one, it's about not getting bored with something that's working. And again, what
game was that? Oh, it was Cleveland. They got bored.
Yep.
And started doing other things, a lot more isolation in the second half when they had clear like matchup advantages on the inside. They got bored, they went away from it, and things shut down against not
that good of an isolation team,
right?
Not
exactly.
that good of an isolation team
against a Cleveland team without Mobley that is getting gashed by everybody across the league right now. And the Wolves did it for the first half of that game, and then just was like, I'm going to go isolation because I like my personal matchup here.
And it's not that like Ant can't be a good isolation player. It's not that Julius can't be a good isolation player, but we got to remember it's all when Rudy's out there, it's coming through the context of you're an isolation player that's got to beat your guy and then beat Rudy's guy at the rim as well. Cause he's going to come over because Rudy's going to be sitting in the dunker and his guy's going to come over like whoever. I mean, choose your best isolation player. Like if they're needing to face that defensive coverage that a Rudy Gobert offense often just forces. It's why Utah wasn't a heavy isolation team. Didn't even get those type of players, really. You know, this is the way that you have to play offense when Rudy Gobert is on your team, particularly when Rudy Gobert is on the floor. Mike said that thing about not getting bored. He also said, I don't have this clip pulled up, but quote, we know what Rudy is deep down and what kind of player he is for our team and how vital he is for our success. We're going to do everything in our power to make the game easier for him to get the most out of him on both ends of the floor. I know people are frustrated with Rudy Gobert, and some people are like, "Oh, this is a problem there, that's a problem there." But like, he's on the team, he's literally not trade eligible, and he just signed a 3-year extension. Whether it's our vision or people listening to this vision of not believing that that's the right way, it is how this front offense is built it, and the coach is wanting, to play through that. And with Finch, like sometimes he's pulling out of that. He's like, all right, they're not finding him. Rudy's not catching it. Like they often don't close with Rudy, or they often keep him out for an extended stretch of time. And they're like, all right, so tonight we're going to pivot into Reid and Randle as our front court in the fourth quarter and do that. Like that needs to though be like a second gear rather than like
that's not like a high.
Yeah.
That's not a high level winning team either, like, and I think a lot of people who like want to punt out at things are like, well, this isn't a high level winning team no matter what. And that would be the pushback I think of like others is like, well, I still think it's in there. And I think in that organization, there are people who are like, I still think it's in there. And there are games like this where you go, maybe it is still in there. And we are just past the halfway point. And like, I would say the offense has been better. And it's been more willingness of Rudy. I think it's been a lot of like Ant's play as well. And then I think Ant's play kind of does spark everything else and get everybody else like doing the things they're better at. So I really think it all starts with him. But like the idea of like it could still be in there, like Rudy on the floor with this roster is still the best version of the team. And so if they can actually find ways to make a good offense with him out there, like they did against Denver, like that's the path. It is funny though, like you talk about the isolation thing not working. Like that's probably a big reason why they generally stink against rim protectors and don't stink against non-rim protectors, because like, hey, if I get in isolation and I beat my guy and it's Jokic waiting for me at the rim,
Sure.
I can still score. And it's Domantas Sabonis waiting for me at the rim, I can still score. Like and it's Jericho Sims, like I can still score. But it's when it's like a Gafford, a lively name your rim protector, that all of a sudden it's like, ooh, this is a legitimate layer of defense that I cannot get past and would require a little bit more tact on my end to create successful offense.
I want to talk a little bit more about Gobert and specifically the Jokic matchup, but let's start by hitting our first break to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. You know, the Falling Knife is the brewery in Minneapolis showing every Wolves game in their tap room with the sound on. But we want to let you know that there will also be a Super Bowl party at Falling Knife this year. Obviously, the conference championship happened yesterday, so we just want to put that on your radar. I'll give you more details on that here coming soon. But also this week at Falling Knife, Trivia Mafia, Wednesday night at 7:30. Trivia Mafia is there every Wednesday at 7:30. They do the initials game Thursday nights at 7:30, every Thursday night at 7:30. And then this week, another added trivia on Sunday night at 5 p.m. They're doing Love is Blind trivia before the new season of Love is Blind airs, and it's a Minneapolis season there. So that's why they're doing that. Falling Knife is the Wolves tap room in Minneapolis, but always plenty of other things going on there as well. You can check out Falling Knife BC on Instagram for their weekly schedule. Today's show is also brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino, and the K-Fan Power Trip Takeover is going on at Treasure Island on Thursday, February 6th and 7th. The idea is kind of like a full weekend there. The event features 3 events, including multiple chances to win a trip to Vegas for the Super Bowl that same weekend. So you're flying from Treasure Island, I guess, to the Super Bowl there. They're kicking off the party in the Island Event Center on Thursday, February 6th from 7 to 9 p.m. with a free live initials game event, prize giveaways, including that trip to Las Vegas on Saturday, February 8th. Then on Friday the 7th, live broadcast and parlay. That's at 5:30 in the morning, the Power Trip morning show, where they will be giving away another Vegas trip. All that. Chris Hockey is performing on Friday night, February 7th at 8 p.m. Tickets are just $20 to that. All this information is at ticasino.com, but we thought that this would be a fun one for you to check out. All right, not last Gobert specific thing, but what really stood out to us in the moment, we're sitting there in Media Bro, right, Jace, is like, okay, like Rudy's involved in the offense. But if I would have came into that game and been like, what is the most important thing? What is the thing I'm most worried about Rudy Gobert in this matchup is like, is he really going to guard Jokic one-on-one? And is he going to be able to handle that and control that? And I still have concerns about that, if I'm being honest, in the playoffs, but they dominated the Jokic minutes in this game. And maybe you can point to some of all right, Denver didn't seem super locked in over the course of the game, but they won the Jokic minutes by 24 points in this game. And I thought but
that wasn't because of defense. Jokic's offensive rating in that game was 120. His defensive rating was 155. That's how you get to 24. They didn't play good defense against Jokic. I don't think it was one of those situations where they repeatedly went to Jokic over and over again and it opened up other things for the off. I hear what you're saying, but what I'm scared about with Jokic, or with Gobert in particular, against these types of players is it becomes such an issue that they just can go to it over and over and over again, and that boost the offense. Rudy did enough in the Jokic matchup, I thought, one-on-one to be able to do that. They won every single stint Jokic was out there. In the first quarter, when he was out there, they won by 9. The second quarter, when he was out there, the Wolves won by 4. Third quarter, they won by 7. Fourth quarter, they won by 4. Yeah, obviously, 155 offensive rating. That's going to do that.
You don't think Rudy was
impactful,
more
on Jokic?
impactful defensively than he was in previous times.
I mean, yeah, it's a low bar. But
that's
Jokic went 9 for 13, and like in the first quarter was just scoring at will. And Aaron Gordon even said after the game, he's like, "Yeah, we should have went to that more often. Like that was our mistake." Like I really do think Denver was like, "Oh, I don't know why we didn't just keep doing that." Even I was like, "Well, he must force the turnovers because Jokic had 7." So I went back and watched them this morning because we were going to talk about this. And first off, like, kind of mean scorekeepers. Like I think the Wolves would prefer this, like with Rudy, but there was like the first one was like Westbrook throwing like a 50-mile-an-hour, like 150-mile-an-hour fastball, like off Jokic's hands and went away, and they gave the turnover to Jokic and not Westbrook. And I was like, oh, okay. But anyway, 6 of the 7 turnovers for Jokic, Rudy was not guarding him. So like I don't really think like 9 for 13, 11 assists, whatever, 120 offensive rating, and only was even guarding him for 1 of the 7 turnovers. Like I don't really think Rudy did it. I think watch back. I don't think it was like, wow, Rudy, look at what he did there. I think we were like, that was his matchup. So
no, that's fair pushback. I'm
know?
gonna cop to that. It's like that's what I am. I will just say, going into a game where their defensive strategy is against Jokic,
you're thinking 45 points.
Yeah, right.
You know,
and then
I get that.
Denver dominating those minutes. So maybe you're right to say I'm highlighting too much of the Gobert defense. I'm just shocked it worked. Sure. Like whatever the happened along the process, I'm shocked it worked. And I do think it is noteworthy that it wasn't just like one bad stretch. They won every one of those Jokic stints. And I did say before I started talking about this, I don't think this is like a signal of like they got that locked up.
Yeah.
Probably to your point. But
I really think like I think their best defense against Jokic is Ant's offense. I really do think that. I think just like people talk about like the spamming of pick and rolls against Jokic, and people are like, well, you can't just do that. I really do think with the Wolves and Ant and the pressure he puts on Denver specifically, like with them not having somebody contain him on the ball and Jokic actually really having to play up because of that. And I think tiring himself out oftentimes because of it. And then it's not even effective because Ant's making the right plays out of it. Like I think Ant wearing down Jokic is their best defense against Jokic. Like I truly do think like what they are able to do to him defensively, and it's what everybody's big game plan of how to, manipulate Jokic or whatever, or exploit him. The Wolves actually have the player to do it. I think that's their best defense if they get another series or when they go to Denver 2 more times this year, I'm guessing, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So let's move to Ant because this is related to Rudy, which is related to Jokic. And you sent this to me. It was like, hey, put up the shot at the end of the Memphis game. I have this kind of running in half motion, but it's the Ant at the end of the Memphis game, putting 2 on the ball. And then if you remember, Jackson came up and they contested that with 2 guys on him. He took a last second buzzer beater that he airballed in that way. Then at the end of the first quarter against Denver on Saturday, it's the exact same thing. They come up and they put 2 on the ball. Actually, bring like a third guy like all the way up there into the gap. On the screen here is he's kind of slowly getting into it. But Ant sees the coverage here like this. They put again 2 on the ball, and Ant does not just resign into going into some step back here.
3. Yeah,
it's the exact same motion of it, but he hits that zip pass to Rudy on a dime underneath the basket, and those are this one happened at the end of the first quarter, so it's an end of quarter situation. It's the first quarter rather than the fourth quarter, but it's this type of stuff that Ant needs to compute and execute often because teams are clearly at the end of quarters going to sell out to be like anybody other than Ant here. And Ant sometimes just needs to oblige with that. And I thought that was a good point out by you.
It was just like that Rudy there was significantly less open than Randle was at the end of that Memphis game. And I just after the game, so many people were like, you can't make that pass. Like, look at Jackson's between him and the pass, as if like the jump pass isn't something Ant's done a million times, and look at the clock. It's like from the time that Ant goes to make that pass to Rudy and he scores it, it's like 1 second. Like passes can go into tight windows in basketball. They do all the time. I think when you freeze frame it, you're like, no, because then that guy who's 2 steps away would somehow get over there. It's like, no, they wouldn't. Like Randle was very open in that Memphis play and
a better at catching.
Yeah. And just didn't make the play. And they're like in a tighter window, Ant trusted his ability and Rudy's ability to complete it. And it's like that to me, like if Ant's A versus B is like Minnesota is very average to, Minnesota actually could be pretty good. I really do think so much of it comes down to their best player and the type of player he wants to be. And I know he's not going to, perfectly execute that every single time. And there are going to be times where that's not even the read. But when the read's there and it's available, like you've got to go for it. Like play the process play. And if you do that again and again, now I like Minnesota's offense a lot more because there's so many more options and they can get so many better things versus imagine had Ant taken that step back three there.
Yeah.
It would have been like, what is Minnesota running at the end of quarters? That would have been the response. It would have been like, well, why is this always what we call? It's like, well, there was a pass right there for a layup. Like if your best player wants to go for it, and he did. He made the right read, and now it's like, oh, okay, that action worked out great. I love how they rescreened there with the, it so much of everything to me comes down to Ant. And he played great against Denver there. And we've seen some games where he plays great. And like, he's just capable of playing great. And I know it's not going to be every night. I know he's 23, all this stuff, but like, if you want the Timberwolves to contend for a title, that's the player that's going to have to be there. No matter who the personnel is, he's got to be that because it's the best players who lead their teams to titles. And he's one of the best players when he plays like that.
And he scored 34, dude.
Yeah. Like the second half, exactly. I mean, we'll get to it, but yeah.
No, it was, and that's the thing is like
4 assists in the first quarter against Denver, 4 assists in the first quarter against the Knicks. Like move the ball, make the plays, get others involved, and then things really loosen up for you.
Well, and in this one we have a specific example of how it loosened up.
Coverage, yeah.
The coverage changed, and this is what we're seeing all the time, right? Is the put in the 2 on Ant, right? The screen comes up 2 on Ant,
super high wall coverage, or just a straight up blitz. Yeah, yep.
And so what do you like? All you could get to is that like moving left step back, which he's actually like good at. Like that's a really tough shot that he's very good at making. But it's like you need to do other things to loosen it up. Like find, even if it's not Rudy under the basket, like that's a kind of tough pass. Yeah. The Rudy on the short roll one is an easy pass that he can make all the time. You run a little bit of risk, right, of Rudy handling it if it's on the bounce or whatever. But like they went to that, and the 4 assists in the first quarter, I think at least a couple of them came exactly through that. And I know for a fact that there was a couple more hockey assists off of it because Rudy catches it in the middle, finds the drop off, right? Or Rudy catches it in the middle, just lays it in over Jamal Murray. They then changed. Next time Ant came in, they're playing some zone, was what was in the second quarter. And then in the second half, you're looking back at me at Media Row and you're like, dude, Jokic just dropped all the way to the rim. Ant can just take threes here if Rudy sets a good screen. And he did, because they were like, we can't bring Jokic all the way up here in this coverage because Ant's picking it apart. And then Ant gets going, right? It was that third quarter where it was multiple Ant threes, including the one that he set the record, I think, where it was like off of a Rudy offensive rebound into his screen, open 3 for Ant. This stuff is a snowball, and Rudy is part of like rolling that snowball down the hill. Ant finding that and still being able to then ride the wave going forward was extremely encouraging. Conley talked about that after the game.
Next game, this game, like how important are these games where Ant's playmaking eventually opens things up for him, just to repeatedly see that, so maybe it becomes more consistent formula?
It's super important. I think he's had similar situations throughout the years I've been with him where, he started making the corner kick out pass where if somebody makes that consistently, he's like, okay, I can make that pass and feel comfortable with it. And now if he continues to see that they won't double me the whole game if I get off the ball a little bit quicker or, make an early read for my teammate can make a play, now I can finally, show what I can do. He's going to continue to be able to do that, continue to be comfortable with it and be patient with his game. So hopefully he just keeps building that momentum, and our team will be a lot better for it.
Like what he got in the third, those are probably some of the best looks he's going to get all year.
Yeah, I told him he had more run-out layups tonight than I've seen him. Caught him a little Julio Jones-ish, like just getting out. And I said, you need to do that more, man. I'm tired of running. I want you to run and throw it ahead to you. You go dunk it, and like that's how you get an easy 7, 8, 10 points. And you look up and you got 35 at the end of the game and didn't sweat. So
it's got to be for Mike. That dude's got to be so patient, just like because these are things. I mean, I just know from us having asked questions to him after games just like that when Ant wasn't doing this stuff. These are the things that Mike has been saying forever to us and to Ant as well. And it's not even necessarily rip on Ant. I mean, this is just you got your vet,
Right.
mentoring your 23-year-old star now of being like, hey, again, like these are the things. And then it opens up like the Julio Jones thing he's talking about, and Ant's getting runouts and in transition. And how many times we've been like, oh my God, how come Ant never gets anything in transition? It's like, again, it's like there's a script out there that works. It just requires buy-in, which I think they had in that game. And then it requires execution, which Rudy rolled out with his play, and then execution from Ant as a passer. Like they did those things. You check those boxes. Like, yeah, it's like you said, this is how we stop thinking about this team as mediocre offense into, a top 10 offense, which is getting to seem pretty real, because it's not, there's other areas where the offense is growing as well. In the non Rudy minutes, like you get that Reid and Randle stuff and the offense and playing 5 out. And you're like, okay, this is a functional offense, right? This is a good offense. And in the Rudy minutes, okay, now the starters are scoring at the beginning of games. Like, that's how we stop pulling our hair out, being like, what? This team shouldn't be this bad offensively. Like, there you go. You got 48 minutes of tape against multiple different coverages of how you do it.
It's you talk about like those runouts, like especially when they come in the second half, it's like, what preserves energy? Like getting off the ball quickly in the first quarter, like, and watching your teammates go score, like that requires a lot less energy than you like breaking somebody down and scoring, 12 your way in the first quarter. And guess what? You're probably a little tired after that. Chris Finch has even talked about this. Like, you can conserve energy on offense too. And that's frankly one way to do it. Even if you are like initiating, like you get off of it and then you're kind of watching the next 6 seconds play out as your teammates make 2 passes and score. It's like, okay, that was a pretty easy way to get to. And then like talk about changing the coverages. Like, guess what? If Ant's not making the right play in the first quarter and he is forcing up like those step back threes and hitting maybe like 1 out of 4, and like Jokic, it'll wear Jokic down having to do it, but guess what? He's probably more committed to doing it and like energized by it if it's working. Like, okay, now we're up 4. I'm going to keep doing this, like where if you're like, well, this isn't even working, so why am I killing myself for this? I'm just going to drop back and stand out of the hoop and hope he misses and try to get a rebound. Like you can kind of break people's spirit when you just like, okay, we've got this coverage. It doesn't work. Like,
well, and what if
it,
and what if like Rudy does fumble the second one that he gives to him, right? I almost wish that like would have happened to see if Ant would have gone to it the third time, because I think that's the next gear that they got to get to, because the goal has to be to get them out of that coverage. It's just like, if that's how somebody's starting and it's the first quarter and they're putting Joe on the ball like that, just obsessed with getting it out of Ant's hands, you need to establish like a new status quo for the rest of the game. And it's like, this is why the first quarters, when they've been so slow, and it's that first 8 minutes when the starters are out there and we're like, oh my God, it's because the defense is taking away the things that the Wolves want to get to easily. And the Ant stuff. And then, going from there, it's just, I don't know how many times I can say snowball rolling down the hill, but this is the correction. This is the correction to why the first quarters have been so poor, and can be something better, even if Rudy's on the floor with them. But quick decisions. That's what you said too. Jaden McDaniels, that's really popped, I think, in the last four games, maybe something like that. I just noticed him catching it in the corner a couple times, and even 4 or 5 games back, and just looking to go right away, right? And not just settling for that corner 3 that he's only made 28% of. And I think I appreciate like the recognition of, in Jaden's mind, of like, hey, I'm not great at this. I'm going to do other things. And that has just led to a whole new world of what he can be as a player on the offensive side of the floor. I think that has been a huge trend that's been pointing up there. So it's not me and you looking at each other the game, be like, oh, there we go. That one led to another corner 3 to Jaden. Great offense. Bing, bing, bing.
Nothing. That great one where it's like it's great ball movement in general, and it gets to him, and he attacks the closeout and throws to Rudy for the dunk, and people are like, "Well, that's the best possession I've seen all year," or whatever. It's like you've actually probably seen that possession before. It just usually ends in a clanked three, and you just roll your eyes at it and like ignore the fact that it's actually pretty good offense up until that point. Yeah, it's just finishing possessions better. I just think he's getting himself going by like being aggressive in many ways, like he's getting himself going on the offensive glass and getting easy ones. He's getting himself going by attacking closeouts or like attacking space offensively and getting easy ones or creating for others. And then like the confidence just grows from there, and now everything is more likely. Like he's making more of these little 8-footers that he gets to with that little like hesitation step. It's just more confident player and like
more activity, more activity.
And that just builds in yourself. Like when you're active, you feel in it and everything. Like there, you actually establish some kind of rhythm when you're active. Like he looks like a significantly better player right now all around. Because I really think like he's finally gotten himself going. I don't think this was like any magic thing. Like I think like increased ball movement within the offense certainly helps, but again, that offense was often leading to like him standing in the corner and missing a three and like, okay, run back down, do it again. I just think like it all started with him attacking the glass more. It really did, like activating himself as a player. And now he just, I think, feels more like a basketball player than somebody like tries hard on defense, stands in the corner on offense.
It does relate to the rebounding. It doesn't seem like a direct connection, but it's the added activity leads to added rebounding for Jaden. First 9 games of the season, Jaden had 22 rebounds. Last 9 games of the season, he has 65.
Yeah,
like it's I mean, the 22 is equally insane in a different direction. But Jaden started the year really slowly. Really slowly. And I think he's very much turned a corner by kind of repurposing the type of player he is. I asked Finch about that after the game.
Getting catches in the corner. He's making quick decisions off of those, not always to shoot it, maybe to go get a shot for himself or make one for his teammates. What's gone into kind of that calculation, and how have you and the staff kind of worked with him to make those decisions?
Honestly, a lot of I think it's just Jaden kind of course correcting here rather than just becoming one-dimensional. We tell him all the time, like, he's a basketball player, he's not just a shooter. So, use all parts of the game. This looks like he played in the first couple years of his career. He was a lot more aggressive out of the corners, and in the last few years, he was probably more catch and shoot out of the corners. But, we see him now driving and connecting with Rudy. We see him now driving and kicking a little bit more as well, which we desperately need that.
It's like I like when he's like he's not just a shooter. It's like he's not a shooter. Definitely not just a shooter. Right. But like you remember like when Rudy first got here, it was like, well, Jaden's somebody who at least knows how to drive in and feed Rudy on a lob. Like it was like the only guy who was doing that early on, and he hasn't even put himself in those positions to attempt that for the last year and a half or whatever.
No, that's what like I remember that once Cat got hurt the first Rudy year, and it was like Kyle Anderson and Jaden McDaniels were the only two who like seemed to get it, or be able to find the spots, understand where Rudy could be effective and impactful. And like you brought up the one from the corner, he did that. I just like that he's often like getting that extra step deeper. Maybe one more step than you would go before throwing the lob, and then getting there and scoring through it. That Britt always called it that rocking chair shot that he would take, and he made it at a good clip, but that wasn't taking the extra step. And now I just see, I really do believe Jaden's gotten a lot stronger. I believe he's gotten a lot more confidence in that space. I think specifically he's gotten like stronger hands. Remember a couple years ago, even then he would just like kind of lose it around the basket. There, like Jaden's a good option around the basket. It's become that. And I wouldn't have said that. Both as a finisher and a rebounder. He's just using his skill set, which is his size and that length and that athleticism, to be an effective basketball player, to Finch's point, even if he isn't a shooter.
Yeah, he like I keep going back to that Clippers game. They won by 2, and it was like Jane hit that shot in the corner, and it was like maybe one of the shots of the year for the Wolves. But it was like when you watched it back, it was like it's actually a terrible shot. Like this guy's hugging up on you. Like this is you are a decent basketball player. You should be blowing by this guy, like putting pressure on the rim here. Like, and now he's doing that. Now he would not be like, yeah, I'm just going to shoot this over this guy and hope it goes in, because that's how you get to 28%. And instead now he's doing what I thought he should have done on that one play. Like, I'm going to attack. I'm going to put pressure. If fully commit, I'm going to score. If they do, I'm throwing it up to Rudy. Like, that's like hard to stop basketball. That's repeatable basketball. That's how like your offensive rating, your team's offensive rating goes up, because you are consistently creating actions that the defense can't really do much with. Like it's all played into each other. But his ascension again is like, it's another step, I guess, in this offense kind of growing. And then we do see, like you talked about Mike, like at the, struggling at points of the year. It's like, it's a lot easier for him to have success too if everybody else is functioning as well. Like, Mike's never going to be the reason you succeed, but he's going to be a successful cog in the wheel. But if other cogs are broken, it's not going to work. You know, so
he's broken.
The starting lineup looks a lot better when everybody like plays and functions the way they're supposed to. It's not like it couldn't work. It was that it wouldn't work. And now maybe it's working a little bit. And just as a team in these last 8 games, 2 weeks here, or whatever, they're the number 4 offense in the NBA, and it's all the good teams up there, like, so it's like, can you belong there? We'll find out. Like, but there are definitely like signs of like, oh, maybe this is not as bad as it looked for the first 40 games.
They have a blueprint now.
Yeah.
And now it's to Mike's point.
You want to stick with it?
Not get bored with it. Yeah, right. And that's still I think an open question with this team.
Especially as you play the bad teams here now. Like, are you going to drop into bad habits? Or are you going to be like, let's do the things that we know work and win this game by 25 points? Like, not every night. I know that doesn't happen every night, but like a couple of those where you're like, wow, yeah, this offense is just consistently doing what it's supposed to do.
Last thing I want to do, just kind of these next 2 weeks for listeners, I'm trying to do like a deadline related segment in most, if not all of the episodes. So I know it's kind of a pivot off of the Denver game, Jace, but I think one of like the biggest topics is if Randle's gone, then you have this pathway to bring both Nas and Nikhil back. If he opts out or he's traded or whatever, Nas and Nikhil back, and you have all this financial flexibility. And that makes a case in and of itself. But we do know that this team appears to be more committed to Julius, certainly, than the fan base is. And there's a reality where he stays, whether that's past this deadline, which I think is somewhat likely, or even beyond this season, probably a little bit less likely than whatever the odds are that he stays past the deadline. And I think the question is, if Randle stays, what does that mean for Nas? And I've got that when I was asked out for some questions and stuff. A couple people sent that to me on Twitter when I did that last week. But it is kind of like the question about like your roster construction here, given that Nas has a $15 million player option that he's almost certainly going to be opting out of, and looking for a new deal. If Julius is here past the deadline, or if Julius is here into the past the draft and into the offseason, start of next season.
Well, that's right. The past the deadline doesn't really matter in my mind. But yeah, go ahead, keep going. Sorry.
No. That's a good way to like delineate it. Is like those are two very different things for a lot of different reasons, of like being in the second apron versus not in the second apron. Like the game board is going to evolve league wide come draft night, when you potentially trade him at another trade window after the trade deadline. So there's just more reason to look at that window for a trade. And I think that should kind of be our operating assumption. Maybe get surprised and they are involved in some sort of Butler deal or whatever, and something happens. But yeah,
not for Butler for anybody. That should be pretty obvious, but not for Butler, but just involved in it.
Yes, and involved in a multi-team trade. Like, well, to either or, after the deadline or after the off season. Like, what do you think this means for Nas if Julius is here?
Yeah,
nothing. You're saying nothing after the deadline. It means it doesn't matter.
I don't know if it does matter. I think if Nas sticks around like 26, 28 minutes, 22, whatever. Like, I think if it gets to the offseason and then it's like, hey, we're trading Julius or whatever, Julius is opting out, like, we want to give you this deal to be our starting power forward moving forward. I don't think Nas will be like, no. Like, I think if the path is clearly there, like, nope, he's not here, you are the starting power forward. Like, I think Nas will be like, okay, like, sounds good. I think if Julius is there, like, I don't think he'll be like, I wanted to be the starting power forward for the last 2 months of the last season, so I'm out of here. Like, it's like, no, here it is. I think that I don't see any real, like, I don't think Nas would have any like lingering, like, no, screw you guys. I don't see that.
What if he opts in? Let's just do that hypothetical.
Sure.
That's
that's
all
where
that exactly happens.
that's
is
where it gets
opt in, no
interesting.
extension.
I do think like if you're a Wolves fan, like guess what? If the Wolves make a playoff run, like I don't think Julius Randle's opting in. So like I don't see that happen. How old is Julius? Don't players almost always kind of opt for the long-term security out of everything?
Typically, yeah, 30.
Yeah. I don't understand too much hand wringing about like, oh, it might opt in.
If he was
I
having
just-
a terrible season,
Yeah, sure, right.
which is not the external view. It's
Right.
It's not what the numbers are saying. It feels worse, and in many ways, it is bad. I get that. Or it has been
sure.
bad here, but those are products of fit. I think, like to your point,
I still
Julius
stand by
opts into
too. Like
31. If
like
he's bad,
I understand that like they're just a 500 team or whatever this year. Like he still is like his net rating is still good. Like his offense rating is still good. Like, and I understand you're saying like maybe him being on the court is depressing everybody else or whatever. Like, and maybe that is true, was true. I feel like he's played pretty well these last few weeks. Maybe it was true. Like it's not just like this terrible fit guy. Like I know this isn't where you wanted this question to go, but like I went back and looked at it like 2 days ago because people were like, well, in New York, they weren't a title contender with him. It was like post OG trade, played 14 games and they were 12-2 with him on the court. Guess what? The Knicks were amazing after they got OG and Julius Randle was on the court. In his second to last game, they beat Denver by 38 and Denver was at full health. And then he got hurt. And then it was just like, I think the Knicks took off once Randle got hurt. It's like, no, that's not the reality. That might be your perception. That's not what the reality was. Like they were dominating 12-2. That's better than what Cat's done. Whatever. Like, like, and he's played pretty well. That's just not going to be the perception of like, this guy stinks. Nobody in the league wants him, like blah, blah, blah. Like, so if he does opt in, I do think then for Naz, it's like, okay, are you not trading him? Like if the front office is like, I think we're going to ride it out. Then if you're Naz, you're probably like, I've waited long enough. Like I'm going to see what else is out here. So yeah, I do think that would very much complicate Naz's future here, and a decision that the front office maybe would have to be like, we got to force a trade or do whatever we have to do if we desperately want Naz to be a part of our long-term future. Or Naz would, because I don't think Naz would just wait around again and be like, yeah, okay, I'll do this again for another year.
Yeah, like the same thing he did before with 2+1, like kind of waiting to see.
Nope, it's like here, you don't get a promotion, but you do get a pay raise.
Yes.
I don't think he would settle for that.
Yeah, no, and I think pay raise is a big thing for him, given he hasn't made that much money in his career being an undrafted player and all that. I think that's probably the primary factor. In all of this. I do. Yeah, it's hard for me to see, or if I were Naz Reid, to be like, all right, that Julius Randle opted in, or they gave him a 3-year extension. Now, if I'm signing this and I'm thinking about like, what even are my pathways to starting or being a 30-minute a night guy, which is fair for him to think of himself, then you're like, all right, so maybe they trade Julius, who they just gave an extension to, and I become or maybe they trade Rudy Gobert, who they also just gave an extension to, and now
I got to play some center probably, or combo center next to Julius. Like
that's an interesting part of it. If we're his agents too, we'd be like, well, Naz, what position do you want to be playing?
And he would say not center.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's I don't know. It's obviously a tricky one, and I think in many ways, scary to people, because there is in the fan base the emotional connection to Naz and that they don't have with Julius, and I think there's a right belief that he could step into being a starting power forward and being a similar caliber player to Julius Randle in his own very different skill set, but similar maybe sort of impact or close to it. I get all of that. It's just an interesting,
and he fits. Yeah. He's like, with age-wise with Ant and stuff, you can just picture those two as like running mates for years, which makes a lot of sense. And you've had this run of guys who are older than Ant, and you'd like to maybe like coalesce a core that can stick together and continue to like have this amazing cohesion for years to come. That's already kind of started, so I understand all of it, frankly.
Like, what if,
I think the organization understands it. I really do.
I think a lot of, if I'm the front office, I'm thinking about, how do we want to be playing basketball when Ant is 25, and if the answer is, we did the heavily committed to defense Rudy option, You're playing defense with him there and you're existing offensively around him. If you're not sure that that's maybe the best style for Ant when he hits his prime, you need to start thinking about 5-out arrangements of your offense. And there's just not that many guys like Nas. You know what I'm saying? Like if you let Nas go and then in 2 years you're like, hey, we actually want to play in a spread floor look. Rudy's now, his contract is done or whatever, traded Rudy. It's going to be hard to click back into a style of offense that is 5-out with really talented players, because Nas, not saying he's like an excellent player, but he has a relatively unique skill set that not as many players have at his talent level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for everything you laid out, like I would be stunned if they don't do everything in their power to make sure that Nas is here long term. But I just don't think it should be like this angst about the trade deadline of like, well, if he's still here past that, then Nas is gone. Because I just don't think that's the reality of it. And I do think like the better this team plays, and I know people will hate this, but I do think, and if he just continues to grow and Jaden plays like at his potential, which he's doing a closer thing to now, and Julius has kind of seemingly settled into a little bit more of a role that he is comfortable with. And if Rudy can muster up like a good, like I know it's a lot of ifs, but you do see like in this West, but it's kind of open, like it could be another run in here. And I just don't think like because of all the things that can go wrong and you can have an injury riddled season and blah, 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 that you should just automatically be like, nope, trade Julius, screw it. Or be like, Julius for nothing, give away assets if you have to, whatever. Like even if you don't get anything back, team talent gets a little worse, whatever. Just clear the plate of this. Like, I think it would be really hard for anybody to see it that way from like an organizational point of view, especially as you look at like, hey, how many good years does Rudy have left? He's on our team. Like how many, this might be like Mike's last ride at it, like this is still a pretty talented team that could contend for something. Like we'd like to take a crack at it, I wouldn't blame them at all if they kind of stood pat at the deadline. And I know people would hate that. Absolutely. But I think as something trends in the positive directions this deep into the season, you go, there could be enough here and we can deal with the future in the future. Like, I really think that's possible. And like I said, hey, if this team goes to the West Finals, Julius Randle not opting in. I would be stunned. I would be stunned. That would take care of, that'd be two birds with one stone.
And there's if that's what plays out, like I just think the draft night exists too.
Yeah, I agree.
And
you might have a first that if you were desperate and you're like, no, we got to get off of this. You might have a first to do it. We'll see.
And I think there's going to be a better landscape to make a trade. I mean, Kyle and I did like a 30 minutes at the beginning of the last episode, just going through these. And it's like, they really only achieve the getting off of the contract and the future benefits are minimal. You're like, okay, brought back a player or two players that are on expirings.
Right.
Like, yeah, maybe you can get them to resign. And I think that's like, if they are going to do it, you should be aiming at that. But it is, again, given the restrictions that you can't like aggregate salaries and whatever, all the second apron stuff. It's hard to find things at the deadline that will really appease that. Jace, let's wrap this up with prize picks. The Wolves play the Atlanta Hawks this evening. And so I picked two from that game. I like Jaden McDaniels to have more than 12.5 points in this game. I don't know Trae Young. Oftentimes Trae Young guards Jaden when they play them. And I felt good about that, but Trae's out. And then old Wolves player Vit Krejci. He is good, man. I was watching
He is good.
He is really good. No Trae. They'll be a little bit more limited. I had initially his points at more than 9.5, but that went away. And so now I'm going to go with Vit Krejci to have more than 18.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. Legitimately a good player, and funny because it's a Wolves player as well. Did you go Super Bowl?
I did not. No.
Oh, okay.
I just couldn't get into it. I was like, it's 2 weeks away. Like, I'll do Super Bowl next week. I did Ant over 5 assists.
Okay.
He's consistently pushing that. Maybe it will be so easy that it'll be like, no, you can score 40 tonight, and that's fine.
Sure.
But I liked where he's been, like playmaking wise. And then
was it a Wolves player?
No, it was just a random one. I didn't do the dunks. I went to the dunks column because I thought it was fun.
Yep,
Oh yeah,
see?
there was. Yeah, I did Jared Allen over 1.5 dunks. He's been clearing it a lot, and like that would be really fun if you're watching that game.
Yeah, he had 2 dunks there, 2 games.
You shouldn't
ago.
just look at the average 5 and be like, does he go over it? It's not like a good strategy. But I was like, I want to do this dunks column. I never do that one. And
playing Detroit. I like it.
Yeah.
So that is a 4. That would be 4 picks there. You can do a power play that would pay 10 to 1. Or you can do a flex play. I kind of like doing these when you do 4, where if you get all 4 correct, it's 5 to 1. But if you just get 3 of the 4 correct, you get 1.5 to 1 on your money there. That's Prize Picks. You can play at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. And if you're new to playing on Prize Picks, use the promo code Dane when you sign up. You will be credited a $50 sign-up bonus. I think there's going to be a bunch of Super Bowl-related deals that come up. I'd see Patrick Mahomes is already on there for more or less than a half-yard passing in the Super Bowl. It's a free square there. So check those out this week, and build a few different lineups for the Super Bowl. It's always fun to have something else going on there. All right, Jace, Hawks tonight. I know we're recording this a little bit later, so this will probably be coming out just a little bit before that. Hopefully, to you listeners, this conversation is relevant. Beyond the Hawks game tonight. The Hawks are
big
really
Hawks game.
They're beating up. I was looking at. I had it
It's
up
like
here.
10.5 point spread. Hawks are down a lot of guys.
No Jalen Johnson.
No Trae Young.
No Trae Young. Reese Shea is a game time decision.
Mm-hmm.
Larry Nance, who's been starting for them, is a game time decision. I think DeAndre Hunter will be back because that was an illness that kept him out there. But yeah, banged up Hawks team who also just lost. I watched them play the Raptors yesterday. They lost by like 20 at home. The Hawks have lost 4 in a row, and it's one of those like keep the momentum going. Do not fall back into that habit that they've had in previous seasons of really dialing it down against a lesser opponent, which Ant is the primary culprit of. There has been less of that, though. There's been less of that from Ant this season.
And Jaden has also really stopped doing that, too. I think Jaden has been even better against, like, he used to, I think, be in the Ant club, and I really feel like he is, especially lately, like, he's doing it no matter what. He's being a very consistent player, which is great to see. Like, play the right way. Like, if you play the right way, that will generate the energy, regardless of opponent. I strongly feel that. Like, it energizes everything because it's just fun. That you don't care who you're playing.
Yeah, have fun with it. It's like the one that always just like stands out of this was that Hornets game when Cat had 60 and just everybody else is like, okay,
was not having fun. And not like they weren't happy for him; they just weren't doing anything. So it's
just like okay, he's gonna win it.
It's not locked in.
Exactly, and that does matter to this team. Of like, take advantage of this game and be like, whatever. Like Nikhil has a big game who hasn't had it. Like there's value to like some of that stuff of just like getting somebody off and like growing some more confidence in the way that like Rudy playing the way that he did last game makes me feel so much better about how Rudy's going to play the rest of this week. Like that's a real thing with this team. And these lesser opponents aren't only an opportunity to get a win first and foremost, but it's an opportunity to
keep building good habits,
not getting bored, right?
When you can do it with little resistance. And now it just like, it's easier to do it. It just becomes more and more like second nature. Like you said, like, it's not like I'm bored of this. It's like, no, this is just what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if they get that ethos, like this team is different, the last 40 games of this season, then they can build and we don't feel stuck like you did in December or whatever, and so big in that sense. But just take care
Every
of it.
game has a purpose. Every game does have a purpose.
And particularly where you are where the Wolves are at in the standings. So Jason and I will be at that game tonight. I'm actually going to Phoenix. So there will be no tomorrow morning. So there will be no show tomorrow off of the big Hawks game. But Kyle and I are both going to be in Phoenix, and we will do an episode immediately following that game on Wednesday night. So that's what's coming up next here. Jace, do you have anything you're working on this week you want to plug?
Nothing thrilling. No,
nothing thrilling. You guys can
I'm
always.
sure my gamer tonight will be incredible. So let's go and read that. If you're like, wow, I'm listening to this on Tuesday morning. I watched last night's game, but I want to like read something super entertaining. I'm sure whatever I write is going to be awesome. So go to twincities.com for that.
There you go. You guys could read Jace at twincities.com, the Pioneer Press, and you can follow him on Twitter at Jace Frederick. Have you back on next Monday, I'm assuming. And yeah,
Unless
until
you bench
then,
me again. Yeah.
I did. What was the reason for that? Oh, because Chris.
It was a Monday day game, so you're like, I don't
Monday
really
day
want to do
game.
a
Yeah,
Monday
we're not doing a
morning-
pod. Yeah.
That's what you
But-
sold to me anyway. Yeah.
And then we just did it right now.
Yeah.
I think I didn't want to do a podcast on Monday morning.
Yeah.
It was
Well, it was
the-
a 1:30 game, so yeah.
Yeah,
But
it would have been tricky. It would have been tricky.
it would have been like, hey, second quarter, hey, podcast just came out. You guys
Yeah,
should.
right. Check this one out.
Yeah.
He's Jace Frederick. Follow him on Twitter at Jace Frederick. Read him in the Pioneer Press until Wednesday evening with Kyle. He's Jace. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.